Today, you are going to learn what not to say to the police after you have been forced to shoot a violent criminal in self-defense. Because if you say the wrong thing after a self-defense shooting, you could end up in prison for decades or civilly sued for thousands or millions of dollars. So let's jump into this. Hey, really fast for new viewers to the channel, I've been involved in law enforcement for over 20 years now. Plus, I was also unfortunately forced into a self-defense shooting incident myself. So the information that I'm going to give to you today in this video is from real life experience. So let's just jump right into what you should not say to the police at the incident scene right after you have been forced to shoot a violent attacker in self-defense. Number one, don't try to prove your innocence right there at that shooting scene. Now, you may be thinking, well, duh, obviously you don't talk right there at your shooting scene, but it is very common for victims or people that's in the right to do what we call verbal vomit right there after the incident, because they know they were in the right and they want to prove they're innocent. And again, at that moment in time, most people are still very amped up. Their adrenaline is still through the roof. Again, they're not thinking with a clear head. All they can think about is that they have shot a bad guy in self-defense and now the police are there. And now what they really want to do is prove their innocence, prove that they were forced to shoot that bad guy in self-defense. And so they will end up verbal vomiting and just trying to say everything that happened that shows that they did do a justified shooting. But again, at that moment in time, right after your self-defense shooting incident, again, you probably won't be thinking with a clear head. And so you may use words that are incorrect, that can maybe be misconstrued and used in court, either criminal or civil court, but used in court down the road against you. So at that moment in time, right after your incident happened and the police have arrived, that is not the time to try to prove you're innocent by telling the whole story of what occurred. Number two, do not try to guess at how many shots that you fired. You have to understand the cops are going to try to account for every round that was fired, and that is because bullets travel very far, so they need to ensure that somebody that's down the block or 2 blocks away didn't get shot while they're sitting on their front porch, or the bullet didn't go through their house, go into their house through their wall or whatever and strike them while they're sitting on their sofa or something like that. So in an attempt to account for all rounds that were fired at your self-defense incident scene, the cops are more than likely going to ask you, how many times did you shoot your gun? And one of the reasons they're going to ask that is because if you say that you shot your gun 5 times and they find 3 bullet holes in your bad guy, then the cops are going to know then that they need to account for 2 other rounds that may have went astray and may have possibly injured an innocent person. Now, the problem with trying to answer how many rounds that you fired when you shot in self-defense is that more than likely you will have fired more rounds than what you think that you actually did. And I can tell you this from personal experience, when a bad guy is pointing his firearm at you and you are shooting back at him in self-defense, I can guarantee you, you are not counting how many rounds that you are firing at that moment in time. Now, here is the problem if you accidentally, incorrectly say the number of times that you shot that bad guy. If the cops ask you, hey, how many times did you shoot him? And you say, you know what, I believe I shot him twice, and it ends up that you actually shot him 5 times, then a greedy civil attorney may try to use that incorrect answer from you against you down the road in civil court. They will, more than likely try to say, hey, he told the police at the scene that he shot 2 times when he actually shot 5 times, so why should we believe, the jury, why should you believe anything that he is saying now? So when he's saying that he was in fear for his life and that's why he shot him, he already lied about how many times he fired his gun at that scene immediately after it happened. So why should you believe anything that he says now to you in court? So simply put, at that scene, if the cops ask you how many times you fired your gun, just simply say, I'm sorry, I don't know. Number 3, do Do not give a detailed statement of everything that occurred step by step at your shooting scene. Like I mentioned earlier, right after your shooting incident, you are still going to be hyped up. Your adrenaline is still going to be through the roof. You will more than likely have lapses of memory. There's also a very high possibility that you may use words that can be easily misconstrued and used against you at a later date in court. So while this is not legal advice in this video, what I do suggest to my friends and family is that if they are involved in a self-defense shooting, that if they belong to a legal self-defense association, that they don't say anything at all to the police when the police arrive to your shooting scene. Now that's of course if you belong to a legal self-defense association that actually sends an attorney to your scene, and they have a hotline that you can call immediately after your shooting to get them to your scene. And that's just one of the reasons why I belong to Firearms Legal Protection. If I get involved in another self-defense shooting, I can call that hotline and an attorney will actually be en route to my incident scene, and my attorney will do all of the talking for me to the cops. And that attorney is going to really make it a much more high likelihood that I go home that night instead of going to a jail cell. And I will tell you this, to have an attorney at your scene doing all the talking to the cops on your behalf instead of you while you are in that state of mind will be a very comforting feeling. And shameless plug, I will put an affiliate link to Firearms Legal Protection down below so you can check them out if you want to. But I will say this, I have found that you get better legal protection for self-defense incidents through Firearms Legal Protection than what police usually get through their own police unions. Now, if you don't belong to a legal self-defense association like Firearms Legal Protection, then what I always suggest to friends and family is that they give a very simple statement to the police at that incident scene so that it tells the police that you legally defended yourself against that criminal, but you don't say too much where something can be used against you in court down the road. So what I always suggest to my friends and family is to say something very simple along the lines of, the bad guy did X. So insert whatever crime he committed against you at that time. So the bad guy did X. That placed me in fear for my life. I was scared for my life. So I defended myself. Now I don't feel good and I wish to be taken to the hospital, and I don't wish to answer any more questions until I speak to my attorney. Now again, what you are doing there is you are telling the police at that scene, the investigators at that scene, that you legally protected yourself and that you are the victim. Those words right there, as long as the evidence is corroborating what you told the police that you protected yourself, those simple words right there will make a huge difference if you end up going to jail that night or if you end up going home. And I can tell you this, again, from personal experience, if you are involved in a self-defense shooting, you want to go home. You want to go to a place of comfort. You want to be with your family. You do not want to go to a jail cell that night. You have to remember that if you say nothing at all to the police at that incident scene, again, this is if you have no attorney coming to your scene to talk to the police on your behalf, but if you say absolutely nothing at all, then there's a high likelihood that the police won't know what they have there. The police will not know if you're the good guy or if you're the bad guy. They won't know if they have a justified shooting or if they have a criminal homicide there. So by giving that simple little statement of, that guy pulled a knife on me and threatened me, I was scared for my life, so I defended myself. Now I don't feel good and I wish to be taken to the hospital, and I don't wish to answer any more questions until I speak to my attorney, again, tells the police just enough so that you have a higher likelihood of going home that night instead of a jail cell, but it doesn't say too much that something can be used against you later in court. Number 4, don't give the police a detailed statement of what occurred until after you've had 2 nights of sleep. Most people are very surprised about this, but there has actually been studies done that have found that people that have been involved in self-defense shootings actually have a better recollection of what occurred during that shooting incident after they've had 2 nights of sleep. What they have found in their studies is that after your self-defense shooting, over the next several days, you are going to replay that incident over and over again in your mind. Also, too, while you're sleeping, your mind rests, and your mind actually puts all those jumbled memories of what occurred during that incident that are all jumbled in your head at that time. They start putting those memories back together, and they start putting them in the order that they happened. So again, people actually have a better recollection of what occurred during that shooting incident scene after they've had 2 nights of sleep. And when you give that detailed statement, if it's decided that it would be in your best interest to give a detailed statement of what occurred, when you give that detailed statement, make sure that your attorney, your self-defense attorney, is by your side, so that as you give that statement, that no words, that you don't accidentally use words that can be misconstrued and used against you again down in court down the road. And if you notice, I keep saying after 2 nights of sleep, not just 3 days later, because you actually need those 2 full nights of sleep for your brain to actually get that rest and to actually process everything that occurred. Number 5, do not try to quote exactly what the bad guy said to you right before you shot him. What studies have found is that humans are not audio and visual recorders. We're not cameras. We're not audio recorders either. We don't remember word for word what was said. What we typically remember is the gist of what was said. What we typically remember is what the bad guy meant and what his words and how his words made us feel. Again, we typically don't remember word for word what somebody says to us, especially in a high-risk, deadly incident like a self-defense shooting. So the problem with trying to quote word for word what your bad guy said right before you shot him is that more than likely, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to get it wrong. And anything that you get wrong that you say in your statement, again, a greedy civil attorney can try to use that against you later in court. Again, you just don't want to give that attorney any reason to say, hey, this is what witness so-and-so said, but now you're saying that the bad guy said this, so why should the jury believe anything that you say in this courtroom? So what other tips can you add that people should not say after a self-defense shooting? Comment down below with those tips so we can all learn from each other. And to learn even more very little known facts regarding self-defense shootings, then click on the video link that should be appearing on the screen just about now to get a whole playlist of that valuable information. Anyways, folks, this is enough internet for me today. I do need to get back to work. Folks, if you made it this far, hey, thank you very much for watching, and I pray that you have a good night.